We're here today with another Spotlight segment with Premier Panton. So good to see you, sir.
Pleasure to be here with you.
Thank you very much.
Or have you here with me.
Yes, absolutely. Always a pleasure. So we're going to just do a deep dive straight into a few topics here this morning. The one that seems to be in a lot of people's minds, I think, requires some degree of clarification, is where do you stand on the east-west arterial expansion? What is your position?
Well, I think I've made it quite clear over the last 2 years at least, and that is that I support the extension of the east-west arterial, but it has to be done in the right way with the right process. We are doing it, and this government has done more to advance the issue of getting the east-west arterial done than any other government in the last 20 years. So we have had frequent meetings. We are very clear in working with the Environmental Advisory Board, with the National Roads Authority, and the consultants to the National Roads Authority. And we're very clear, and the consultants are very supportive, and they feel that this process that we're undertaking with the EIA, with the hydrology and hydraulics study that is being carried out by the NRA, is the correct approach, so that we understand exactly how to build this road that doesn't create problems down the road for us. Pardon the pun there, but we must know exactly what we're doing and to get it right. We have had too many instances in this country, Sandra, where things have been done which create problems, which create things like traffic problems or problems in connection with the management of storm water, this type of thing, which creates flooding in neighborhoods that never flooded before. And for us to make sure that we get this right, we've got to do this process. And that's what's behind this. I feel very strongly that we should not be any different from many of our other Caribbean territory states that actually do environmental impact assessments when they're building roads like this, particularly in sensitive areas. Should it have been done before? Absolutely. We had a previous administration, we had two previous administrations that could have done it 5 times, 8 times over. But this administration is moving forward, and we're looking forward to getting this road extension at least completed up to the eastern part of Panton, so that we can start making a real difference in freeing up some of the traffic. As you know, we're not going to be able to build roads to solve our traffic problems, so it won't be long before we start having more accumulation of traffic. And a part of the solution is therefore making sure that we implement a good, strong, reliable public transport system. And that we're working on as well.
So let me just clarify one point. So because previous governments haven't, for whatever reason, been able to advance this road in any meaningful way, that does not mean that you're prepared or your government is prepared to rush the process at the sake of the environment.
No, we're following what the legal requirements are. And as I said before, any country, even in Jamaica, when you're doing these kinds of roads, you do an EIA to make sure you understand exactly what the implications are, what the potential impacts are. It's not just in the environment that the EIA is related to, but it may be other really important things, like, as I said earlier, stormwater management, like, making sure that we're actually accomplishing what we set out to accomplish, and we don't have to spend more money to fix the problem later on, or find out that we have a problem that we can't fix at all. And that would be the worst possible situation. So this is about making sure that we are following a process which tells us how to do it and get it right the first time. And that is moving forward. I think during the course of 24, the public will see that road being moved forward, and there will be sections of it that will be completed by the end of 24 that will actually start being able to take traffic and make a difference.
All right, wonderful. So, the last time we spoke with you, you were knee deep, maybe I should say, shoulder deep in the budget process, and there have been a number of, you guys were in Parliament as a result of that. You've, obviously advanced the process now. And one of the things that came out of the most recent parliamentary session is that there's been some positive movements as far as it relates to stamp duty concessions. I want to spend some time really trying to make sure that the general public understands what is now in place and what this government was already committed to, but has actually now put in law.
Right.
Yeah.
So we, from the time we came into office in 21, we were implementing by way of policy, if not specifically by the legislation. We've been implementing a mechanism through which Caymanians can get additional assistance, for example, with second properties. We may have done in rare instances, even possibly third properties where there was a really strong, compelling case. But effectively, we have been doing the first-time purchases and the purchases of second properties. And what we have outlined recently is a change that we are putting through by way of initially drafting instructions, going to the legislative drafting, which will produce a draft stamp duty amendment bill, and that will change once we take that, publish that, then and take it to Parliament and get it passed. That will then implement the positions that we have set out in policy. And what we have set out in policy most recently is an increase in the values for the purchase of property, just raw land, and then similarly for developed property. For first-time Caymanian buyers, just like one individual, but we've also set out for between 2 and 10, which the law currently contemplates, but we've increased the numbers. The reality is the market, we've had significant increases in property valuations, and we need to be able to reflect the reality so that we're helping people where they need the help. And so just, in terms of setting it out then, for first-time buyers, we're increasing the price or the value up to $250,000. It's currently in the law $150,000, and that is going to attract 0% stamp duty. And again, this is all for Caymanians, not anyone outside. For developed properties, we are going to have a value up to $550,000, and again, that will be 0 stamp duty payable, and that's for just for one buyer. If we have, or if a Caymanian applies for an abatement where the property is valued, and again, just going back to just raw land, if they apply for an abatement where it's higher than $250,000 but less than $350,000, we will charge 3.75% of just the difference. So they're going to get the 0% stamp duty up to $250,000, and then anything in excess of $250,000 but not in excess of $350,000 will be 3.75%.
Which
so
is
it's just the
basically
difference.
50% savings.
I
think it's about half. 'Cause normally it's
It would be a 50%
yeah.
savings on the difference.
On the difference, yes.
Right.
Yeah, okay.
Right.
So, one of the criticisms that was levied against your government recently is that you all had done nothing to help Caymanian home buyers. So let's just clarify, if you have any numbers for me, that would certainly be helpful. Since the PAC government has been in office, how many, dollar amount, it would be fine, how many people or, a dollar amount has benefited from these concessions? So you said it wasn't in law, but you guys are basically doing it in practice.
Well, it was a combination of things.
Okay.
I mean, we do have what's in law currently.
Right. Yes.
That's the up to 150. But what isn't in law currently is anything in excess of the one time or the first property that you buy.
Right. Okay.
So I think we have, since 21, we have probably granted something like in excess of 4.5 million, 4.6 million, maybe somewhere in that sort of range, in approvals, and that's on the discretionary side. For those who are applying typically under the first time concession, that prior to what we've been doing recently since our recent approval in Cabinet on the 13th of September, prior to that, it was being operated purely in accordance with the provisions in the law. So that was for first time buyers in relation to raw land, for example, it was a maximum of 150,000. And I think those numbers, the 22 numbers are somewhere around 4.5 million for the first time Caymanian buyers. And I think for 21 it was a little bit less than that. It might have been, let's call it 3.6, somewhere in that sort of range. But that's a reflection of Caymanians that are applying, knowing that they have this benefit and that are able to access this benefit that's already set out in the law. The other numbers I gave you previously, which, as I said, were somewhere in the region of 4.5 million or thereabouts. Those are the numbers in the discretionary range. So we've actually, between the first time and the discretionary second time buyers, we've probably had something in the region of about 11 or 12 million in concessions that we've granted to Caymanians. And as I said, the majority of that would have been for the first time buyers, but a significant amount in the region of 4.5 million, or maybe a slightly more than that, would have been just the discretionary approvals that help with like second properties.
Okay.
So we recognize the challenge that Caymanians face. We recognize the issues that are happening with Caymanians not being able to get closing cost confirmations as quickly as possible. And they are competing in the marketplace against people from all over the world who may have complete liquidity and they can move very quickly to close on properties. So while we have been doing a great job, I think, of assisting Caymanians in meeting their needs to be able to buy property, to get on the property ladder, and then to be able to buy some additional properties, whether it was an investment or whether it was for one or more of their children, for example. Whatever the reason is, we've been assisting a lot in respect of that. But we recognize that it needs to not have to go through this discretionary process. It needs to, which can take, it can take a week, it can take 2 weeks sometimes, depending on whether documents have not been updated or supplied in full. what I want to have is I want this all in the law. I want the first-time Caymanian buyer provisions with the new limits, the increased limits. I want that set out in the law, and I want the second Caymanian purchases with those limits set out in the law, so that when a Caymanian is sitting in front of their loans officer and they are working out with their loans officer what the closing cost is going to be to complete on our property, they can work that out right then and there. They don't have to write across to government administration building and ask for a discretionary approval, which they may have to wait some time on. They can work it out right away, and that loans officer can say to that Caymanian, yes, you qualify because I know what it's going to cost for you to close on this property, and it's now safe for you to go and make the offer and confirm, and you can compete on an almost equal footing, if not equal footing, with anybody else who's trying to buy that property.
Yes. So it creates certainty then.
That is what it is. It creates that certainty, and it eases that squeeze that Caymanians have felt in terms of trying to buy property, get on the property ladder, and perhaps buy some additional properties just as an investment. At the end of the day, Cayman has to be successful for our people as well. We're a very successful country, but it also has to work for us.
Absolutely.
Right? So these are the kinds of things that we focus on, and making sure that we relieve that pressure and we assist our people in being able to make these kinds of investments, so that they can help to build wealth, and they can help to solidify their family's financial position going forward.
Okay, very good. So let's make sure that our audience is crystal clear. Who is considered a qualified purchaser? You keep saying Caymanians. Is it Caymanians and spouses of Caymanians? I mean, how is that defined?
It's Caymanians. If you have to be a Caymanian to be able to get the benefit of it, and we have it set up for like single Caymanian buyers in relation to just raw land, and then single Caymanian buyers in relation to developed property. Then we also have different scenarios where you have between 2 and 10 Caymanian buyers who are just buying raw land, and the same thing for Caymanians who are, for example, coming together to buy a developed property or even a second property, which, as I said, could be, well, it's not mine, I hope, no. Caymanians, and they're working together to be able to, to buy these properties.
Okay. All right, that's quite good to know. What happens if you inherit property? So, my granny decides to give me piece of land. I know that there's certain persons are considered love and affection in any event.
Yeah. So those where you have received property by way of a transfer for natural love and affection, or by way of a will or something like that, that doesn't matter. It would need to be a purchase before it would be taken into account. So if you receive, just to be clear, if you receive property by way of natural love and affection, or you receive a transfer by natural love and affection, or you receive property by way of a will, so you're a beneficiary under the will, those properties won't count if we're looking at assessing whether you are a first-time buyer or whether you're a second-time buyer.
Okay. Because you're not actually purchasing them, so it's not.
Correct.
Yeah.
It'd have to be a purchase.
Right. Okay. And are those properties then completely, regardless of the amount, duty-free, concession-free?
But it depends on what you're talking about. As I said to you, if you are talking about raw land, and you are either a single person or between 2 and 10, you can go for land up to CI 250,000 in value and get it duty free. If you are the 2 and 10 for land, you can go up to 450,000 and get it duty free. If you are buying developed property as a single Caymanian, it's up to 550,000. You get that duty free. I'll give you some tables so you can put that up when you're when you're running your show, and you can show it'll set out exactly what it reflects. And so for developed properties, for groups between 2 and 10 Caymanians, that limit is up to 600,000, and that's duty free as well. If you, in either case, whether it's raw land or whether it's developed land, developed property, if you exceed the numbers, if the value of the property you're trying to get exceeds the number by no more than 100,000 in each case, you'd only pay, you pay 0 stamp duty up to the original maximum, and then you'd pay 3.75% of the difference. So just as an example with the raw land, if it's say $300,000, the property is worth $300,000 that you're buying, let's say it's a canal lot or something, and you are a single Caymanian, you're a first time buyer, and you're able to buy that, you can get 0 stamp duty up to the 250, and then you'd only pay 3.75% of the difference, which would, in that example, would be 3.75% of 50,000, right? And the same thing would apply on the developed property side. You can get up to 550,000 with 0 duty. If your developed property is say 600,000, then you're only going to pay stamp duty of 3.75% on the 50,000, because you're going to get up to 550,000 duty free. It gets easier when you look at second properties in both cases, because the only difference there really is, in relation to second properties, whether it's raw land or developed property, is the valuation numbers. The stamp duty amounts are going to be very similar, or be the same for all of those. So for second properties, if it's raw land, it's up to 300,000, and you're paying 3.75%. So you're paying half the stamp duty that you would normally pay. And if it's 2 to 10 Caymanians coming together to buy property, they can buy up to 550,000 worth of property and get a stamp duty of 3.75%. That's on the land side. On the developed property side, it goes up a little bit. So one person buying a developed property, that's a second property, would be 600,000. You only pay 3.75% stamp duty. Between 2 and 10, the number bumps up another 100,000 to 700, and if you don't exceed that, you're only paying 3.75%. So it's very helpful on the first time buyer, whether it's raw land or developed property, and it also provides a very significant benefit for second properties.
Okay. All right, so let's break it down. I'm sure there are people who are listening who are thinking, right, I will be a Caymanian soon. You know, my application is in, I'm gonna get status. Do I benefit from any of this at the time that I buy, that I'm, granted my status? So say, for example, I purchase a piece of property now, I get my status a month or two later. Is there any way to sort of apply?
No, it would, what you would qualify for then is you'd be able to, you wouldn't get a first time buyer provision if you achieve Caymanian status subsequent to buying your first property.
Right.
But you could qualify for the second time purchaser.
Okay.
So if you down the road after you become a Caymanian, if you were, for example, if you were trying to buy raw land after that, you could go up to $300,000 and you'd only pay 3.75%.
Okay. And what about spouses, where you're like in a civil partnership or you're married to a non-Caymanian spouse? Is that considered 2 or more, but then they're not Caymanian? So
right. So it would be Caymanians, and what you would do is work out how they're owning it, and you would work out sort of how much if let's say, because it's conceivable, right? We have 2 types of ownership. We have joint ownership, and we have ownership in common.
Right.
And with the ownership in common one, you can have shares.
Right.
So somebody can own like, 25 shares and somebody can own 75 shares, right? If the non-Caymanian owns 75 shares, then the Caymanian gets the benefit of whatever they're entitled to, whatever they qualify for, they would get the 25% benefit of that. If it's a joint ownership, I guess it would be regarded as 50-50, and the Caymanian would get whatever benefit they qualify for. The non-Caymanian wouldn't get that benefit immediately. It would be down the road if they get status down the road.
Right. And it becomes a little bit tricky once you're married to someone, because in most instances you're not really separating even land ownership, because it's that joint tenancy. You don't really, separate each other in that way.
It's not normal, but it does happen.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. What about people who might purchase property and put it in the name of a company as opposed to an individual? If I guess it's a similar situation, if the Caymanian owns majority shares in the company or sole shares in the company, then they could benefit from that. So
what we do is we look at the beneficial ownership of the company, and so we would sort of disregard the company and see who owns the company. If you're the Caymanian that owns the company, then, and this is something, when you apply, you are required to disclose whether you have a property in the name of a company or whether you bought it in your own name and put it in the name of a company, that sort of thing. You're required to disclose that. And so you're required to tell us, if you have disclosed it, you're required to tell us who the beneficial owner is.
Right.
And so we disregard the company and we just say, okay, that's you. So if you have a property that you have purchased and put in a company, then that's your first property. You may qualify for a second property purchase under this new scheme, but you would not be regarded as a first-time buyer even if you put it in the name of a company.
Now, we know that previously there was some sort of exemption for properties in the 7 Mile Beach Corridor for first-time Caymanian home buyers. Does this still apply? Or?
Those still apply, and it's still the same.
Okay.
All those provisions will remain the same.
And what is the logic behind that? Can you explain that to people?
Well, I think originally the logic behind it is that if you can afford to buy some of those properties, then at least that's a part of the logic. I can't say I wasn't involved with dealing with the changes to the law at that time. But a part of the logic would be, if you could afford to buy in those areas, then you don't need the assistance. The truth is, you're still subject to the same limitations though. And perhaps the reality, more likely, is that it's not that if you can buy, it's that you won't be able to buy in those areas anyway. You're never going to get these benefits because of these limits, buying in those areas. So I think the original rationale was probably a combination of different things, reflecting the reality that those types of properties, those areas are going to be priced so high that it's never going to happen.
Does someone who co-sign on a loan, say with a relative, does that exclude them from then benefiting from if they turn around and purchase their own property? Does that work against them in any way?
If the property's in their name, yeah.
So they got to think carefully about.
That's right. You should think carefully about how you end up with a property in your name. If you think that you'd like to take advantage of these stamp duty exemptions or lowered stamp duty levels, you can plan how you do it in a way that maximizes the benefit to you and your family.
All right, so let's go through some of the logistics now of how someone goes about actually submitting an application for the stamp duty waiver. Who can they contact? Is there a government website that is useful for them to go and have a look at?
We are going to try to put in place a website like a portal, which allows this application to be made through this portal. At the moment, we are just accepting requests that come through by email. So you just submit an application in writing to, it's usually copied to MOF, Ministry of Finance at gov.ky. There are some people who might put my name on it as well, my email address. Some who might put the financial secretary's email address. There may be one or two other names as well. But MOF at gov.ky is the primary email address to be used when you're submitting applications for stamp duty concessions. And you can also phone if you need assistance and you have questions. You can phone, and of course all the extensions begin with 244. And I think there's a 244, there's a 244-2205, 3580, and 2272. So those three numbers with 244 prefix, you can reach somebody. If you can't, just call the switchboard number, 949-7900, and someone can direct you then to the right location, the right person to respond to you. But typically they come in by email.
Okay. And just as a further note, for anyone who's interested in purchasing property in Cayman Brac, there are special sort of considerations to encourage Caymanians to actually purchase property in the Sister Islands.
There are existing policy provisions in relation to the BRAC where you get certain concessions if you build within a certain period of time, and I think it's either 2 years or 4 years. I don't remember offhand. That must mean that you bought in BRAC recently. But good for you. Good for you.
Yes, while it's still affordable.
Yeah, but so you get these concessions there if you build within a certain period of time.
Right.
It's possible to get an extension of that as well, provided you have a good reason for it. But at the end of the day, it's about trying to encourage people to, have second homes there, or even primary homes in our beautiful Sister Islands.
All right, wonderful. Well, thank you so much. I think that this was extremely helpful to kind of understand the process. And when do we expect this legislation to be in effect?
Well, I'm hoping that we'll be able to get this in Parliament before the end of the year. But it obviously, depends on legislative drafting and getting the revised bill right, and then getting it through cabinet, published, and of course it has to go through the usual 28-day process. In some circumstances, it's possible to shorten that process, but they're usually more exceptional than not. So that's the hope, to get this, to Parliament before the end of the year.
And one final point that's probably worth noting is that a lot of people in sort of, go hand in hand in conjunction with this, they're going to ask, well, what about the pension changes that are coming? When might that actually be in law as well?
Well, we've been following up on that, waiting to get that revised bill as well. That obviously was fairly involved provisions, and we are hoping to have that be able to be brought forward to Parliament before the end of the year.
Okay, very good. Well, Premier Panton, thank you so much, as always, for being accessible to the people and for answering our questions. I know sometimes the questions might seem a bit mundane, but people were trying to understand how all of this works, so we always appreciate.
The important thing is that people understand that these provisions are in place now. These and similar provisions, we've taken a similar approach. Perhaps we've increased the levels now, but we've taken a similar approach since we first came into government in 2021. And what we have, so we've had some of the provisions relating to second homes and second just raw land purchases in place. From then, people have been applying, but what we have outlined now, what I outlined in Parliament when we were last there, is what's in effect now, and this is so Caymanians can become aware of this, and we outlined it in Parliament. We've outlined it on your show here now, and you'll have these tables that you can put up to show exactly what the details are, and these are benefits that are available to Caymanians that will help Caymanian families to get properties that they can have for their families as a home, or they can start to build generational wealth by buying additional properties and getting concessionary benefits for that. So really important, and thank you as always for getting information out to people and being available to clarify at times when people sometimes don't perhaps grasp it the first time, and you and others are certainly available to make it clear to everybody so that they know what they can get. They can get the clarity on it. And I want to get this bill done through so that it's in black and white, and they don't have to rely on coming to get a discretionary waiver. It'll be very clear, and they can make decisions from day one when they're sitting with their banker.
Absolutely. Well, thank you so much. Really appreciate it.
Thank you very much.
All righty.
Take care.